Rich in watchmaking events, 2018 is also the 185th anniversary of the famous Swiss brand Jaeger-LeCoultre. At Jaeger-LeCoultre, if we're talking about watch patrimony and history, we're also talking about design. To present its 2018 innovations at the SIHH, the Fine Watchmaking Expo in Geneva, the Great House, as it's known, chose to highlight a style that recalls the interior architecture and iconic style of the late 1960s. A time marked by change and revolutions of all kinds, with audacity, energy, and invention. From Brigitte Bardot to the Beatles, the Prague Revolution to May 1968, from the legalization of the contraceptive pill to the first steps on the moon, not forgetting the early days of the internet with ARPANET, its predecessor, the first heart transplant, or the birth of pop art. In 2018, a breath of fresh creative air is now blowing over its timepieces. A new team is in charge of the artistic direction of Jaeger-LeCoultre that has updated the codes of an era marked by one of its most legendary models, the Polaris.
The house of Jaeger-LeCoultre has a fabulous history tied to watchmaking and craftsmanship. We have in-house enamelers, setters, more than 180 trades, more than 100 types of artistic knowledge. We've been making all our movements in Sentier, in the Joux Valley, since 1833. Some of our cases are made in-house, and all the craft arts are made in-house.
With a concentration of forces on technical development rather than image, the watch manufacturer, nicknamed the watchmaker of watchmakers, has always supplied other watch houses with movements and calibres, like Patek Philippe or Vacheron Constantin. Since its creation in 1833, Jaeger-LeCoultre has created more than 1,350 calibres, an impressive number that shows its unrivaled productivity. A manufacturer that also works for scientists, notably with the Geophysics model. Anti-magnetic, waterproof, anti-shock, precise, the Geophysics chronometer was offered to the commander of the Nautilus, the nuclear submarine that completed its maiden voyage to the North Pole in 1958. Not forgetting its history with Aston Martin, notably with the Amvox. The 185th anniversary of Jaeger-LeCoultre helped celebrate artisans, or rather the artists that work in-house or in collaboration with this famous brand, and pays tribute to their expertise that guarantees the success of these incomparable watches. There is a spotlight on Casa Fagliano, a beautiful house that continues to collaborate with the manufacturer and reminds us of the connection between Jaeger-LeCoultre and the world of polo. These Argentine family bootmakers, since 1892, fabricate by hand only 80 pairs per year, for players considered as demigods in Argentina. Artisans recognized for their exceptional expertise who sculpt into the soft, supple, and ultra-resistant leather of the precious timepiece bracelets of the manufacturer. And to better celebrate their art, here's the Reverso Tribute Duo Face timepiece, limited to 100 copies in pink gold, adorned with a double-faced case with a dial on each side displaying different time zones. Everything highlighted by a two-tone corduan leather bracelet, whose fabrication and leatherwork were presented live on the stand, the signature of a tradition and a simply unique skill. Who doesn't know the history of this emblematic model of the Swiss brand, the Reverso? The concept of this famous line was born in 1931 in a British polo club in the heart of colonial India. Born from the challenge of developing a model robust enough to withstand the shocks caused during a polo game, soon the popularity of the model surpassed the boundaries of the sports world and became an Art Deco icon. Today, it is still the sporting spirit and a new dynamism that are put forward to seduce 40-somethings, with another icon, the Polaris, the famous diving watch. Originally, the Polaris was created in 1965, but its lines and dial were reworked in 1968. With only 1,714 copies made at the time, the Memovox version of the Polaris is a highly sought-after piece by collectors for its design, its alarm function, and its rarity. 50 years later, the manufacturer had to return to a model that contributed to its legend.
Cette année, la maison Jaeger-LeCoultre lance une nouvelle ligne sport.
This year, the house of Jaeger-LeCoultre launched a new sport line, Elegant Sport. This new sport line is inspired by an iconic model of the house, the 1968 Polaris. This watch at the time was destined for divers. It had the uniqueness of having a complication, an alarm that would remind divers when it was time to resurface. This watch was very modern for its time, from a design point of view, for its characteristics, its wide open dial, its size of 42 millimeters, which for the time was huge.
42 mm, qui était pour l'époque une taille géante.
Jaeger-LeCoultre thus decided to build its new collection based on the features of this 1968 Polaris. Very fast readability, with its larger-than-normal index contrasting with its black dial.
Pour la Polaris Memovox, le challenge consistait à créer une montre.
For the Polaris Memovox, the challenge was to create a watch that was very identifiable with the Polaris history, yet it was totally redesigned. The ergonomics are different, the movement is different, the finish of the watch is different. The pushers are straighter, more taut. The proportions were updated to transport the initial design of 1968 to a much more contemporary aspect.
Le design initial de 1968 dans un aspect beaucoup plus contemporain.
The Memovox remains the model most inspired by the historical Polaris and resolutely claims its vintage side.
Today, the alarm on the Memovox functions differently than the first model. The first model, to put it simply, needed 3 different backings. A backing on which the hammer hit, a backing that was the resonating membrane, and then a backing that closed the watch. Today, it's a timber and a hammer that hits the timber. The sound is much louder and much nicer.
The 42mm case of the Polaris Memovox is waterproof down to 200 meters. It's the only one of the collection to present a full back engraved with Memovox and the number in the limited series of 1,000 pieces. For this new Polaris collection, Jaeger-LeCoultre created a new steel bracelet with H-shaped links, with brushed edges and polished angles. A Polaris that is also available in a chronograph version.
Là, nous avons le Polaris chronographe.
Here we have the Polaris chronograph world time, so a complication. The idea was to put useful complications in the Polaris, complications that are used on a daily basis. With world time, you have an instantaneous reading of the time around the world. Once you have set the time of the country in which you're in, you immediately have each time difference written on the watch.
Décalage horaire inscrit sur la montre.
During the SIHH, Jaeger-LeCoultre organized an exceptional evening for the launch of this elegant men's sports collection. Benedict Cumberbatch, the brand's ambassador, joined the festivities, as did some of the brand's friends from around the world: Boran Jing, Diego Luna, Rebecca Ferguson, Ellie Bamber, Milos Bikovic, and Sophie Hunter, to name just a few of the prestigious guests. While Jaeger-LeCoultre is famous for its grand complications, which it continues to make more attractive and breathtaking over time, the manufacturer isn't finished surprising us with each new step of its past, present, and future story.